The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning in September of 1876, smudged with travel dust and bearing a feminine hand that spelled out the name Grant Ramsay in careful script across the front. And when he opened it, with calloused fingers still sore from mending fence lines, he found himself staring at words that would change the course of his solitary existence forever. Zara Zimmerman had written back, accepting his proposal of marriage sight unseen, and she would arrive in Opal, Montana territory on the 20th of the month by stagecoach. Grant stood on the porch of his ranch house, a sturdy structure of timber and stone he had built with his own hands over the course of 3 years, and read the letter again. The wind swept down from the mountains, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of an early winter. At 32 years old, he had resigned himself to a life alone after the woman he had courted in his youth married another man and moved back east. But loneliness had a way of eating at a man, especially during the long Montana winters when the snow piled so high you could barely see the barn from the house. He had placed the advertisement in a Boston newspaper on a whim, or perhaps it was desperation. Rancher seeking wife. Must be strong of spirit and willing to work. Life is hard but honest. Those simple words had somehow reached Zara, a woman he knew only through 3 letters exchanged over the summer months. She wrote with intelligence and humor, describing her life as a seamstress in a crowded boarding house, her love of books, and her desire for something more than the narrow existence the city offered her. She never mentioned family, and he wondered if she had any. The 20th came faster than he expected. Grant rode into Opal that morning, his best horse saddled and groomed, a wagon following behind driven by his ranch hand, a weathered man named Samuel who had worked the land with him for 2 years. The town sat in a valley surrounded by mountains, a collection of wooden buildings that served the ranchers and miners scattered throughout the territory. The general store, the saloon, the small church with its simple cross, and the hotel where the stagecoach stopped twice a week. "You nervous?" Samuel asked, pulling the wagon alongside Grant's horse. "Terrified," Grant admitted. His stomach had been in knots since dawn. "Well, you cleaned up nice at least." Samuel grinned, showing the gap where he had lost a tooth in a fight years ago. Grant had indeed made an effort. He wore his only good shirt, dark blue and free of patches, and he had trimmed his beard and hair the night before, studying himself in the small mirror above his wash basin and wondering what Zara would think when she saw him. In his letters, he had been honest. He was not a handsome man. His nose had been broken twice, his face was weathered by sun and wind, and his hands were rough from hard labor. But he was honest and hardworking, and he owned his land outright, 300 acres of good grazing land with a creek that ran year-round. The stagecoach arrived late, as it often did, rattling into town in a cloud of dust just after noon. Grant stood outside the hotel, his hat in his hands, watching as the driver climbed down and opened the door. 2 men emerged first, businessmen by the look of their suits, heading immediately toward the hotel without a glance around. Then a woman appeared in the doorway, and Grant's breath caught in his chest. Zara was tall, nearly 5 feet and 8 inches, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a gray traveling dress that had seen better days, and she carried a single worn carpetbag. Her face was angular, strong rather than delicate, with high cheekbones and a determined jaw. She looked at the town with eyes that took in everything, assessing and measuring, and then those eyes found him. He must have looked as nervous as he felt because her expression softened. She stepped down from the coach with the driver's assistance and walked toward him, moving with a grace that surprised him given her height and the exhaustion that must have come from days of travel. "Mr. Ramsay." Her voice was lower than he expected, pleasant and clear. "Yes, madam." "Miss Zimmerman." He felt foolish asking when he knew it had to be her. "Zara, please." She held out her hand and he shook it carefully, aware of how rough his skin was against hers. But her palm had calluses too, he noticed. From sewing, probably. "It is a pleasure to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine. I hope the journey was not too difficult. Long but bearable." She looked around the town again, then up at the mountains. "It is beautiful here. The letters did not do it justice." Relief flooded through him. "I am glad you think so. Are you hungry? We could eat at the hotel before heading to the ranch." "I think I would prefer to see my new home, if that is acceptable. I have eaten enough hotel food to last a lifetime." Samuel helped load her carpet bag into the wagon, tipping his hat politely to Zara. Grant assisted her onto the wagon bench, then mounted his horse. The ride to the ranch took an hour, following a road that wound through grassland dotted with cattle. Grant pointed out landmarks as they went: the creek where he watered the herd, the line of trees that marked his northern boundary, the distant peaks that glowed gold in the afternoon sun. Zara was quiet but attentive, asking occasional questions about the land and the cattle. She had clearly never been on a ranch before, but she listened carefully to his explanations. When the house came into view, she straightened, studying it with those assessing eyes. "You built this yourself?" "Most of it. Samuel helped with the roof." "It is solid, well made." She turned to him, and he saw approval in her face. "You are a man of skill." That simple praise meant more to him than it should have. He helped her down from the wagon, and she stood in the yard, looking at the barn, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden now mostly harvested for the season. The wind pulled a few strands of dark hair loose from her bun, and she tucked them back absently. "I should show you inside." Grant picked up her bag and led her to the house. The door stuck slightly, as it always did, and he made a mental note to plane it down before winter. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace he had built with rocks hauled from the creek. 2 doors led to the bedroom and a small storage room. It was not much, but it was clean and well kept. Zara set down her bag and walked slowly through the space, running her hand along the rough-hewn table, examining the shelves where he kept his few dishes and supplies. She looked into the bedroom, seeing the bed with its quilt made by a woman in town, the chest where he kept his clothes, the window that looked out toward the mountains. "Mr. Ramsay," she began, then paused. "Grant, I need to speak with you about something important before we proceed with this marriage." His stomach dropped. She had changed her mind. Of course she had. What woman would choose this rough life when she had seen it? "All right," he managed to say. She turned to face him fully, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression serious. "I should have written this in my letters, but I was afraid you would not want me if you knew. I am being a coward by telling you only now, but I cannot in good conscience marry you under false pretenses." Grant waited, his heart pounding. "I am Barren." The words came out firm but pained. 7 years ago I was married briefly. My husband died of fever within a year, but in that time we tried to have children and could not. Afterward, I saw doctors who confirmed that I would never bear a child. I understand if this changes your mind about the marriage. Most men want sons to inherit their land, to carry on their name. I cannot give you that, and you deserve to know before we stand before the preacher." The pain in her eyes was real and deep, and Grant understood that she had carried this secret like a weight, fearing his rejection. He stood there in the simple room he had built with his own hands, looking at this woman who had traveled across the country to marry a stranger, and he felt something shift inside his chest. "Zara," he said quietly, taking a step toward her. "I am not going to lie and say I never thought about having children. But I did not place that advertisement because I wanted sons to work the land. I put it in the paper because I was lonely, because I wanted someone to share this life with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone to sit with by the fire in winter. I wanted a partner, a companion. If God sees fit to bless us with children somehow, then that would be a joy. But if He does not, then your love is enough for me." She stared at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You mean that?" "I do. I would not say it otherwise." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "I know we are still strangers in many ways, but I hope we can build something good here together." With or without children, a tear escaped, running down her cheek. She did not pull her hand away. "I have been so afraid to tell you. I thought you would send me back." "I am not sending you anywhere unless you want to leave." "I do not want to leave." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Grant, for understanding, for being kind about this." "There is nothing to thank me for. It is just the truth." They stood there in the afternoon light streaming through the window, two people who had taken a leap of faith, and Grant felt something he had not felt in years: hope. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. They were married in the small church in Opal on Saturday, with Samuel and the preacher's wife as witnesses. Zara wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Grant wore the same blue shirt he had worn to meet her. The ceremony was brief, the words familiar and solemn, and when the preacher told him he could kiss his bride, Grant did so gently, aware that this was still new and strange for both of them. Back at the ranch, they settled into a cautious routine. Zara proved to be a hard worker, rising before dawn to make breakfast, tending the chickens, and taking over the vegetable garden with an efficiency that impressed him. She mended his clothes, organized the house, and began making improvements he would never have thought of. Curtains appeared on the windows, made from fabric she had brought with her. She rearranged the shelves in the kitchen so that everything was easier to reach. She even tackled the storage room, turning it into a proper pantry for the supplies they would need to get through the winter. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Grant learned that she had grown up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a shopkeeper who drank away what little money they had. Her mother had died when she was young, and she had largely raised herself, learning to sew to earn money. Her brief marriage had been to a printer's apprentice, a kind but sickly man who had succumbed to fever during a harsh winter. After his death, she had moved to Boston, hoping for better opportunities, but life in the city had been hard and lonely. Grant told her about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about coming west after the war, about building this ranch from nothing with his own sweat and determination. He told her about the hard winters, the losses when cattle died or were stolen, the small victories when the herd grew and the land produced. He told her about his dreams of making this ranch something substantial, something that would last. They shared a bed, but Grant did not push for intimacy beyond holding her at night. He sensed that she needed time to adjust, to feel safe with him. They were married in the eyes of the law and God, but they were still learning each other, still building trust. 2 weeks after the wedding, the first snow came. It was early for the season, a brief dusting that melted by noon, but it reminded them both that winter was coming fast. Grant and Samuel spent long days moving the herd to the lower pastures, repairing the barn roof, and stocking the woodpile. Zara worked alongside them when she could, her strong frame and determination proving invaluable. She learned to handle the horses, to milk the cow Grant kept for fresh dairy, and to shoot a rifle with surprising accuracy. "Where did you learn that?" Grant asked one afternoon after she shot a rabbit for dinner at 30 yards. "My father, before the drink took him completely, he used to take me hunting outside the city." She reloaded the rifle with practiced hands. "I was a better shot than my brothers. You had brothers, too. Both died young, fever and accident. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he heard the old pain beneath it. Grant was beginning to understand that Zara had lived a harder life than her letters had revealed. She carried her losses quietly, without complaint, and she faced each day with a determination that he admired deeply. She was not the soft city woman he had half expected. She was tough and capable, and she was becoming indispensable to him. October turned to November, and the real cold arrived. The creek froze at the edges, and the cattle huddled together in the pastures. Grant spent his days checking fences, breaking ice so the animals could drink, and hunting for deer to supplement their food stores. Zara kept the house warm, cooked meals that filled his belly and lifted his spirits, and worked on sewing projects by lamplight in the evenings. She was making a new quilt, she told him, with pieces of fabric she had saved over the years. Each scrap had a story, and she shared them with him as she worked, her voice soft in the firelight. It was during one of those quiet evenings that things shifted between them. Grant was mending a bridle, his fingers working the leather, when Zara set down her sewing and looked at him. "Grant, may I ask you something personal?" He looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "Of course. Are you happy? With this marriage, I mean, with me?" He set down the bridle, giving her his full attention. "Yes, very much so. Are you happy?" "I am." She hesitated, then continued. "I worried that you might come to resent me, for not being able to give you children, for not being what a wife should be." Grant moved from his chair to sit beside her on the bench, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he warmed them between his palms. "Zara, you are everything a wife should be. You work hard, you keep our home, you talk with me and share your thoughts. I look forward to coming inside at the end of the day because you are here. I have never been happier than I am right now. Truly, truly." He lifted her hand and kissed it, a gesture that surprised them both. "I know we married as strangers, but you are not a stranger to me anymore. You are my wife, and I care for you deeply." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat that way for a long time, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. When they went to bed that night, something had changed. They made love for the first time, slow and tender, learning each other in the darkness. Zara cried afterward, but they were good tears, she assured him. Tears of relief and joy, of feeling wanted and cherished. Winter settled in hard after that. The snow piled high, and the temperatures dropped so low that the water in the house froze overnight despite the fire. Grant and Samuel worked tirelessly to keep the cattle alive, breaking trails through the snow so they could reach shelter and food. Zara kept the house running, melting snow for water, rationing their supplies carefully, and tending to Grant when he came in with frostbitten fingers and exhaustion etched in every line of his face. On a particularly brutal night in January of 1877, Samuel did not return from checking the northern fence line. Grant waited until dawn, then rode out into the blizzard to find him. Zara begged him not to go, terrified that she would lose him, but he could not leave Samuel out there alone. He found his ranch hand 3 miles out, his horse having thrown a shoe and gone lame, Samuel himself half frozen in a snowdrift. Grant got him onto his own horse and led them both back through the whiteout, praying the entire way that he could find the ranch again. Zara had kept the fire blazing and water heating. Together, they got Samuel inside, stripped off his frozen clothes and wrapped him in blankets. For 3 days, Samuel burned with fever, delirious and calling out for people long dead. Zara nursed him with the same determination she brought to everything, spooning broth into his mouth, bathing him with cool cloths, sitting up through the nights when Grant had to sleep so he could work the next day. Samuel pulled through, his constitution tough as the leather he worked with, but it was a close thing. When he was finally lucid again, he looked at Zara with gratitude that brought tears to his weathered eyes. "You saved my life, madam. I will not forget that." "We both did," Zara said simply. "You are family now." Those words seemed to mean something to Samuel, who had no family of his own that Grant knew of. The old ranch hand became fiercely loyal to Zara after that, treating her with a respect and affection that went beyond mere employment. The winter dragged on, but the three of them weathered it together. They lost some cattle, as every rancher did, but the losses were not as bad as Grant had feared. When spring finally broke in late March, the relief was palpable. The snow melted, the creek ran high and fast, and the grass began to push through the sodden earth. Grant and Zara celebrated their 6-month anniversary quietly, sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, and they said nothing for a long while. "I love you," Grant said finally. "I should have said it before now, but I am saying it now. I love you, Zara." She turned to look up at him, her eyes bright. "I love you too." "I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid it was too soon or that you might not feel the same." "I feel the same." He kissed her, slow and deep, pouring into it all the emotion he had been holding back. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calves were born, wobbly-legged and curious. The garden was planted with seeds Zara had ordered from a catalog over the winter. She expanded it, adding new rows for vegetables and herbs, even some flowers along the edge, because she said a home needed beauty as well as practicality. Grant built her a small greenhouse from salvaged windows, a place where she could start seeds early and keep plants through the winter. In May, a letter arrived from Boston. Zara opened it at the kitchen table, and Grant watched her face go pale as she read. "What is it?" he asked, alarmed. "My aunt. She was my mother's sister, the only family I had left. She has died." Zara set down the letter, her hands shaking. "She left me a small inheritance. $200. $200 was a significant sum." Grant took her hand, squeezing gently. "I am sorry about your aunt. I barely knew her. She never approved of my marriage to Thomas, and we were not close after he died, but she remembered me in her will." Zara looked at Grant, tears in her eyes. "This money, I want to use it for the ranch, for us." "Zara, that is your money. You should do with it what you want." "What I want is to invest it in our future, our home." She wiped her eyes. "I was thinking we could expand the house. Maybe add another room or two, and we could buy more cattle, grow the herd. I want to build something with you, Grant, something lasting." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Then that is what we will do." They used the money wisely. Grant bought 20 head of good breeding cattle from a rancher in the next valley. They hired a carpenter from Opal to help expand the house, adding 2 new rooms and a proper covered porch that wrapped around the front and side. Zara chose the designs, sketching them out on paper and discussing every detail with Grant. She wanted a room that could be a study or library, a place to keep books and have space for writing or reading. The other room, she said vaguely, could be used for storage or guests. Grant did not miss the way she avoided saying what that room could truly be: a nursery. Even though they both knew it was unlikely, there was still a flicker of hope neither of them wanted to extinguish completely. The work on the house continued through the summer. Grant and Samuel and the carpenter worked long days, and Zara kept them fed and supplied with water and encouragement. By August, the additions were complete, and the house looked like a proper ranch home, solid and spacious. Zara furnished the new rooms with items ordered from catalogs and a few pieces made by a furniture maker in town. The study became her domain, filled with the books she had brought from Boston and new ones she ordered. She spent evenings there, reading or writing letters to a few friends she had maintained contact with. The extra room remained mostly empty, furnished only with a simple bed and dresser for the occasional traveler who might need shelter. Neither of them spoke about it much, but sometimes Grant would catch Zara standing in the doorway, looking at the empty space with an expression he could not quite read. In September, exactly 1 year after her letter had arrived, they held a small celebration at the ranch. Samuel was there, along with a few neighboring ranchers and their wives, the preacher and his family, and some folks from town. Zara had cooked for days, preparing a feast that impressed everyone. There was music and dancing in the yard, and Grant waltzed his wife around to the tune of a fiddle played by one of the neighbors. She laughed, her face flushed with joy, and he thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "Happy anniversary," he murmured as they danced. "Happy anniversary," she replied, her eyes locked on his. That night, after everyone had gone home and they were alone, Zara told him something that changed everything. "Grant, I need to tell you something. I was not going to say anything yet, in case I was wrong, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I think I am with child." Grant stared at her, unable to process the words, but the doctors said, "I know what they said. But I have missed my courses for 2 months now, and I am sick every morning and my body feels different. I did not want to believe it at first. I thought maybe it was something else, some illness. But Grant, I truly think I am carrying a baby." He pulled her close, his mind reeling. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. There is a woman in town, a midwife. I was going to ask if you would take me to see her." "Yes, of course, tomorrow, we will go tomorrow." He held her at arm's length, studying her face. "How do you feel? Are you all right?" "I feel wonderful. Terrified, but wonderful," she laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I never thought this could happen. I had made peace with it, and then this. It feels like a miracle." "It is a miracle," Grant agreed, pulling her close again. They went to see the midwife the next day. Her name was Margaret Thompson, a capable woman in her 50s who had delivered most of the babies in the county. She examined Zara and confirmed what they both hoped and feared. "You are definitely pregnant, Mrs. Ramsay. About 2 months along, I would say. The baby should come in late April or early May." Zara burst into tears and Grant held her, his own eyes stinging. Margaret smiled at them, understanding the weight of this moment. "I do not know why the doctors said I could not have children," Zara said through her tears. "They were so certain." "Doctors do not know everything," Margaret said kindly. "Sometimes the body just needs time or the right circumstances. You are healthy and strong, and I see no reason why you should not carry this baby to term. But you need to take care of yourself. No heavy lifting, plenty of rest, good food. And come see me every few weeks so I can check on you." They agreed to everything. On the ride home, Grant could not stop looking at Zara, still half convinced he was dreaming. A baby. Their baby. He had told her that her love was enough and he had meant it. But this unexpected gift felt like a blessing beyond measure. The pregnancy progressed well. Zara bloomed with health, her face glowing, her body rounding gently. She continued to work, though Grant and Samuel both fussed over her, trying to keep her from doing anything too strenuous. She tolerated their hovering with good humor, insisting she was not made of glass. Winter came again, but it was gentler than the previous year. The snows were lighter, the temperatures not quite as brutal. Grant was grateful for that, not wanting Zara to endure the harsh conditions in her delicate state. She spent much of the winter sewing baby clothes, tiny gowns and blankets that she worked on with a contentment that filled his heart. The extra room was transformed into a nursery, painted and furnished with a cradle that Grant built himself, carving it from good oak and sanding it until it was smooth as silk. In April of 1878, as the snow was melting and the first signs of spring were emerging, Zara went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Margaret stayed with them, coaching Zara through the contractions, while Grant held his wife's hand and tried not to let his fear show. He had seen cows birth calves that died, had lost mares in foaling, and he was terrified that he might lose Zara or the baby or both. But Zara was strong, just as she had always been. She labored through the pain with a determination that awed him, and finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a baby's cry filled the room. "A boy," Margaret announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy baby boy." Grant stared at his son, tiny and red-faced and perfect, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. Margaret cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Zara's arms. His wife looked exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but the smile on her face was radiant. "Our son," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Grant, we have a son." He knelt beside the bed, putting his arm around her shoulders, looking down at the miracle they had created. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much. I love you too." She kissed the baby's forehead gently. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the winter, but now that the baby was real and here, Grant found himself reconsidering. "What about Thomas? After your first husband? He was a good man, was he not?" Zara looked up at him, surprised. "You would do that. He was part of your life, part of who you are. And without that time in your life, you might not have come west, might not have found me. I think it would be a good name." "Thomas Grant Ramsay," Zara said softly, trying it out. "Yes, I think that is perfect." Thomas was a healthy baby, strong and loud when he wanted to be fed, which was often. Zara recovered quickly from the birth, and soon the house was filled with the sounds of infant cries and laughter. Grant found himself walking around in a daze, still hardly able to believe that he was a father. He would stand over the cradle at night, watching his son sleep, marveling at the tiny fingers and the small chest rising and falling with each breath. Samuel was equally taken with the baby, carving toys and making funny faces to get Thomas to smile. The old ranch hand took his role as honorary uncle seriously, declaring that he would teach the boy to ride and rope as soon as he was old enough. The ranch prospered that year. The herd grew, the garden produced bountifully, and Grant was able to hire another hand to help with the increased work. They built a bunkhouse for the hired men, expanding the operation slowly but steadily. Zara managed the household accounts with the same efficiency she brought to everything, and Grant came to rely on her judgment in all matters related to the ranch. Thomas grew quickly, meeting every milestone with enthusiasm. By his first birthday, he was walking and babbling, getting into everything with the curiosity of a child who knew he was loved and safe. Grant and Zara threw a party for the occasion, inviting the neighbors and friends they had made over the years. The house was filled with laughter and joy, and as Grant looked around at the people gathered in his home, at his wife holding their son, he felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. That night, after everyone had gone and Thomas was asleep in his cradle, Grant and Zara sat on the porch, watching the stars. "Can you believe it has been almost 3 years since I arrived here?" Zara asked, her hand in his. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like you have always been here." "I feel the same way." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so scared when I came here. Scared you would reject me, scared I had made a terrible mistake, but this has been the best decision of my life." "Mine too." Grant kissed the top of her head. I meant what I said that first day. Your love was enough for me. Thomas is a blessing beyond measure, but even without him, I would have been happy. You made me whole, Zara, and you gave me a home. Not just a place to live, but a real home. A family. Everything I never thought I could have. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the ranch surrounding them. An owl hooted in the distance. The cattle lowed softly. The creek babbled its endless song. This was their life, built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. The years continued to unfold with the rhythm of seasons and the demands of ranch life. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic child who followed his father everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could run properly. At 3 years old, he sat on his own pony, a gentle mare that Grant had bought specifically for him, his face alight with pride. Zara watched from the porch, her hand resting on her swollen belly, pregnant with their second child. "He is fearless," she called out to Grant. "Just like his mother," Grant replied, leading the pony in gentle circles around the yard. The second baby arrived in the autumn of 1881, another difficult birth, but with a happier outcome. This time it was a daughter, and they named her Rose after Zara's mother. Rose had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and she was quieter than Thomas had been, content to watch the world with solemn attention. Samuel, now in his 60s, doted on both children, carving more toys and telling endless stories of his days as a younger man. The ranch continued to grow, and Grant found himself becoming a respected figure in the community. He was elected to the town council in Opal, helping to make decisions about roads and schools and other civic matters. Zara became involved with the church, organizing fundraisers and helping families in need. Their lives had expanded beyond just survival into something richer and more complex. In 1883, tragedy struck when fire broke out in the barn. It started in the middle of the night, the cause never fully determined, perhaps a lantern knocked over or a spark from a horse's hoof striking stone. Grant and Samuel and the hired hands fought the blaze desperately, managing to save most of the horses and cattle, but the barn itself was a total loss. They stood in the dawn light, covered in soot and exhausted, staring at the smoking ruins. "We will rebuild," Zara said firmly, coming up beside Grant with water for the men. "We have done it before. We will do it again." And they did. The community rallied around them, neighbors coming to help raise a new barn, bigger and better than the old one. It took most of the summer, but by autumn, they had a structure that would serve them for years to come. The experience reminded Grant of how much things had changed since those early days when it was just him and Samuel trying to survive. Now they were part of a community, connected to the land and the people in ways that went beyond mere proximity. Thomas started school in Opal in 1884, riding into town each day with Grant when he had business there, or sometimes with one of the neighbors who had children the same age. He was a quick learner, taking to reading and arithmetic with enthusiasm. Rose, now 3, was developing a love of animals, spending hours in the barn with the horses and cattle, fearless despite her small size. "She is going to be a rancher," Samuel predicted, watching Rose fearlessly approach a bull calf twice her size. "Or a veterinarian," Zara said. "She has a gift with animals." In the evenings, the family gathered in the study, reading together or playing simple games. Grant taught Thomas to play chess using a set he had ordered from Denver. Zara read to Rose from books of fairy tales and adventure. These quiet moments became the bedrock of their family life, times when the work was done and they could simply be together. As the children grew, Grant and Zara's love deepened into something even stronger than those early passionate days. They knew each other completely now, had weathered hardships and celebrated joys together. They could communicate with a glance, anticipate each other's needs, work together with the kind of seamless coordination that came from years of partnership. In 1886, Margaret the midwife came to the ranch with unexpected news. She was getting too old to continue her work, she said, and she had been training a younger woman to take over, but she wanted to talk to Zara about something else. "There is a baby in town," Margaret said quietly, sitting in the kitchen with Zara and Grant. "Born to a girl barely 16, no family support, father long gone. She cannot keep the child. She wants it to go to a good home. I thought of you immediately." Zara looked at Grant, her eyes questioning. They had not discussed having more children. Rose was 5 now, Thomas was 8, and their hands were full with the ranch and the existing family. "Tell us more," Grant said carefully. "It is a little girl, just 3 weeks old, healthy and beautiful. The mother loves her but knows she cannot provide for her. She wants her daughter to have a chance at a good life." Zara reached across the table and took Grant's hand. "What do you think?" "I think," Grant said slowly, "that we have been blessed beyond measure, and maybe it is time to pass that blessing on. If you want to do this, I am with you." "I want to," Zara said immediately. "Another daughter." "Yes." They went to town the next day and met the young mother, a girl named Sarah who looked exhausted and heartbroken. She held her baby with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "I want her to have everything I cannot give her," Sarah whispered. "A family, a home, love. She will have all of that," Zara promised, taking the baby gently. "I swear to you we will love her and raise her as our own." They named the baby Grace, and she fit into their family as if she had always been there. Thomas and Rose were thrilled with their new sister, taking turns holding her carefully under Zara's supervision. Samuel proclaimed that the ranch was becoming overrun with children, but his gruff words could not hide the tenderness in his eyes when he looked at Grace. The adoption was finalized by a judge in the territorial capital, making Grace legally and officially a Ramsay. Sarah left town shortly after, and Grant never knew what became of her. But he hoped she had found some measure of peace, knowing her daughter was loved. The ranch continued to prosper through the late 1880s. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and Grant attended the celebrations in Helena, proud to be part of this new chapter in the territory's history. The children grew and thrived. Thomas showed an aptitude for working with horses, training them with patience and skill. Rose indeed pursued her interest in animals, learning from a traveling veterinarian who came through the area and eventually apprenticing with him. Grace, as she grew, showed artistic talent, drawing pictures of the ranch and the mountains that hung on the walls of the house. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1891. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, a place he had always loved for its view of the mountains. The old ranch hand had been part of their lives for so long that his absence left a hole in the family. But they took comfort in knowing he had died happy, surrounded by people who loved him, having lived to see the ranch grow from a struggling operation into a thriving enterprise. In 1892, Grant and Zara celebrated their 16th anniversary. They had aged, both of them showing gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but they were healthy and strong. The ranch now employed 6 regular hands, ran over 200 head of cattle, and was considered one of the most successful operations in the county. "Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" Zara asked as they stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The children were inside, Thomas helping the younger girls with their schoolwork. "Never," Grant admitted. "When I placed that advertisement, I was just hoping for someone to share the work and the loneliness. I never dreamed I would have all of this. a wife I love more than life itself, 3 incredible children, a ranch that is more than I ever hoped for. I was so afraid when I came here, Zara said softly. Afraid of rejection, afraid of being a burden because I could not have children. And then Thomas came against all odds, and then Rose, and then Grace. We have been given so much. Grant put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. You were never a burden. You were a gift. From the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, you have been the best thing in my life. I love you, Grant Ramsay. I loved you when you said my love was enough for you before we knew about Thomas. I loved you through every hard winter and every hot summer. I love you now, and I will love you until the day I die. And I will love you just as long, Grant promised, kissing her with all the tenderness and passion that 16 years of marriage had not diminished. The next few years brought more changes. Thomas, at 18, met a girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. She was smart and pretty, with a good head for business, and Grant and Zara both approved. They married in the spring of 1894 in a ceremony at the ranch that drew people from all over the county. The young couple moved into the bunkhouse that had been converted into a small house, and Thomas began to take on more responsibility for running the ranch. Rose, at 16, went away to study animal medicine in Helena. It was hard to let her go, but Grant and Zara were proud of her determination. She wrote letters every week, describing her studies and the city, promising to come home and practice her skills on the ranch when she finished her training. Grace, at 8, continued to enchant them all with her drawings and her gentle spirit. She had no memory of Sarah, her birth mother, knowing only Grant and Zara as her parents, Thomas and Rose as her siblings. She was as much a Ramsay as if she had been born into the family. In 1896, Thomas and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Samuel in honor of the old ranch hand. Grant held his grandson with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the realization that he was now a grandfather. Zara cooed over the baby, already planning all the things she would teach him and make for him. "We are getting old," Grant said that night, watching Zara brush out her long hair, now more gray than dark. "Speak for yourself," Zara retorted, but she was smiling. "We are not old. We are experienced." "Is that what we are calling it?" Grant laughed, pulling her into bed beside him. "Well, experienced or not, I would not change a single thing about our life together. Not even the hard times, the winters and the losses and the struggles, not even those. They made us who we are. They made this family what it is." Zara snuggled against him, her head on his chest. "You are right. Every struggle brought us closer. Every loss taught us to appreciate what we have. I would not change anything either." Rose came home in 1898, having completed her studies. She set up a practice treating animals throughout the county, working out of a building Grant built for her near the ranch house. She had a gift for healing, a patience and intuition that reminded Grant of Margaret the midwife. Animals that other people had given up on recovered under Rose's care. She became known throughout Montana as one of the best animal doctors around. Grace, at 12, was showing signs of becoming a beauty like her mother. She was quiet and thoughtful, spending hours sketching the world around her. Grant commissioned a proper art teacher from Opal to give her lessons, wanting to nurture her talent. The walls of the house were covered with Grace's artwork, a chronicle of their family and their land. In 1900, the new century arrived with celebrations throughout Opal. Grant and Zara attended the town party, dancing together as they had done for decades, moving with the ease of long practice. Grant was 56 now, Zara 53, and they were content. The ranch was thriving under Thomas's management, with Grant serving more as an advisor than the day-to-day boss. They had money in the bank, a family that surrounded them with love, and the satisfaction of having built something lasting. "Do you remember what you said when I told you I could not have children?" Zara asked as they danced under the stars, the music playing around them. "I said your love was enough for me," Grant replied, "and I meant it. You saved me that day. I was so certain you would send me away that I had made the journey for nothing. But you looked at me with such kindness and told me I was enough. I have never forgotten that moment. And I never will forget the courage it took for you to tell me. To risk rejection and trust that I would understand." Grant held her closer. "We have had a good life, have we not? The best life. Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was sewing in that boarding house in Boston, wondering if I would die alone and forgotten. You will never be forgotten. Our children will remember you. Their children will remember you. We built something that will last long after we are gone." They danced until the music stopped, then walked slowly back to the ranch, hand in hand, under a sky full of stars. The house was lit with lamps, warm and welcoming, filled with the people they loved. This was their legacy, Grant thought. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the family they had created, the love they had shared, the lives they had touched. In 1902, Grace at 16 announced that she wanted to go to San Francisco to study art at a proper academy. It was a bold decision, and Grant worried about letting his youngest daughter travel so far from home. But Zara encouraged it, remembering her own need to find her path, and eventually Grant agreed. They sent her off with money and blessings and strict instructions to write every week. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children now, 2 boys and a girl, and the ranch house often rang with the sounds of grandchildren playing and laughing. Grant taught the oldest, Samuel, to ride and work with cattle, passing on the skills he had learned over decades. Zara baked cookies and told stories, spoiling the grandchildren in the way that grandmothers were supposed to. Rose, at 24, met a rancher from the next county at a cattle auction. His name was Henry, and he was steady and kind, appreciating Rose's intelligence and skill. They courted properly and married in 1903, and Rose continued her veterinary practice while also helping Henry with his ranch. Grant gave her a piece of his own land as a wedding gift, wanting her to always have a connection to the family home. In 1905, Grace returned from San Francisco, her talent honed and refined. She had sold several paintings while at the academy and had been invited to show her work in galleries. But she chose to come home to Montana, saying that the mountains and the big sky were what inspired her most. She set up a studio in town and painted scenes of the West that people bought and hung in their homes, preserving a way of life that was slowly changing. Grant and Zara were in their 60s now, slowing down but still active. Grant still rode out to check the herd, though not as often or as far. Zara still tended her garden, though the rows were smaller than they used to be. They spent more time on the porch, watching the world go by, content in the knowledge that they had done well. In 1907, Thomas took over full ownership of the ranch, with Grant signing over the deed in a ceremony that left them both emotional. Grant kept the house and a few acres around it, enough for Zara's garden and a small stable, but the rest belonged to Thomas now. It was time, Grant knew, to let the next generation lead. "Does it make you sad?" Zara asked that night as they lay in bed. "To give it up, a little," Grant admitted. "But mostly I feel proud. We built something good and now Thomas will continue it. That is how it should be." "We have done well," Zara agreed. "Better than I ever thought possible." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for over 30 years, comfortable and content. The years continued to pass with surprising speed. Grandchildren grew and had children of their own, making Grant and Zara great-grandparents. The ranch prospered under Thomas's leadership, expanding and modernizing while still maintaining the core values that Grant had instilled. Rose's veterinary practice thrived, and she trained others in her methods, spreading her knowledge throughout the region. Grace's paintings hung in homes and galleries across the country, celebrated for their honest depiction of Western life. In 1910, Grant and Zara celebrated their 34th anniversary. They were both in their 60s, showing the wear of years of hard work and hard living, but they were healthy and content. The family gathered at the ranch for a party, 3 generations coming together to celebrate the marriage that had started it all. "Make a speech, Pa," Thomas called out, raising his glass. Grant stood slowly, his joints protesting, and looked around at the gathered family. His son and daughters, their spouses, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, friends and neighbors who had become family over the decades. And at the center of it all, Zara, his wife, his partner, his love. "I am not much for speeches," Grant began, "but I will say this. 34 years ago, a woman stepped off a stagecoach in Opal, and my life changed forever. She was brave enough to travel across the country to marry a stranger. She was honest enough to tell me a truth that could have ended everything before it began. And I was fortunate enough to see past that truth to the woman herself, to understand that what she offered me was far more valuable than anything else. Her love, her partnership, her strength. We built this ranch together. We raised a family together. We weathered every storm and celebrated every joy together. And I would not trade a single moment of it for anything in the world. To Zara, the love of my life, and to all of you, the family we created together." The gathering erupted in cheers and applause. Zara was crying, and Grant moved to her side, pulling her close. They kissed, and the family cheered again, the sound echoing across the ranch that they had built from nothing but hope and hard work. As the party continued into the evening, Grant and Zara slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. The sounds of family and celebration drifted from the house, the soundtrack of their legacy. "Did you ever regret it?" Grant asked quietly. "Coming here, marrying me?" "Never," Zara said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this love. It has been everything I never knew I needed." "I told you your love was enough for me," Grant said, "and it was, but we got so much more than that. We got Thomas and Rose and Grace. We got this family, this life. We got everything." "We did," Zara agreed. "We got everything." They sat together as the sun set and the stars emerged hand in hand, hearts full. The story that had begun with a letter and a leap of faith had become something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a legacy of love, a family that would endure, a home that would stand for generations. And as the night deepened and the sounds of celebration faded, Grant and Zara remained on their porch, together as they had been for 34 years, as they would continue to be for whatever years remained. The Wild West that had been so harsh and unforgiving when they started had been tamed and settled, but their love had remained constant through all the changes. It had been enough then, and it was enough now. It would always be enough. The years that followed continued to bring both joys and sorrows, as life always does. In 1912, Grant's health began to decline. He developed a persistent cough that would not go away, and his energy faded. Rose examined him with her trained eye and gentle touch, and delivered news that was expected but still devastating. His lungs were failing, weakened by years of breathing in dust and cold air and smoke from countless fires. There was no cure, only time. Grant took the news with the same quiet dignity he had approached everything in his life. He put his affairs in order, making sure that Zara would be taken care of, that the family understood his wishes. He spent his remaining months doing the things he loved most, sitting on the porch with Zara, playing with his great-grandchildren, riding slowly through the land he had claimed and built upon decades ago. Zara never left his side. She tended to him with the same fierce devotion she had shown when nursing Samuel through his fever all those years ago. She read to him when he could not sleep, held his hand through the bad nights, and made sure he was comfortable and loved. In the spring of 1913, on a day when the mountains were clear and bright and the air smelled of new grass and possibility, Grant Ramsay passed away peacefully in his sleep, Zara's hand in his family surrounding him. He was 69 years old. They buried him on the hill next to Samuel, where he could look out over the ranch he had built and the family he had created. The entire community turned out for the funeral, a testament to the impact he had made on the lives around him. Thomas delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about his father's strength and kindness, his integrity and love. Zara stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and strong as they lowered her husband into the ground. She did not cry until later, alone in the house they had shared for so many years, clutching his shirt to her chest and finally letting the grief overwhelm her. But Zara was strong, as she had always been. She mourned deeply, but she did not break. She continued to live in the house, tending her smaller garden, spending time with her children and grandchildren. She painted with grace, learning the skill in her later years and finding it soothing. She helped Rose with difficult animal cases, holding the creatures still while her daughter worked. She advised Thomas on ranch matters, her sharp mind still keen even as her body aged. In 1918, Zara became ill. It was sudden and swift, a fever that Rose could not treat, that left her weak and fading. As she lay in the bed she had shared with Grant for so many years, her family gathered around her. She spoke with clarity and peace. "I have had a good life," she told them. "Better than I ever dreamed possible. I came to Montana expecting very little, and I received everything. I loved your father with all my heart, and he loved me just as completely. You children, you grandchildren, you are the proof of that love. I am not afraid to go. I am ready to see Grant again." Zara Zimmerman Ramsay died 3 days later, surrounded by love at the age of 71. They buried her next to Grant, reuniting them in death as they had been united in life. On the headstone, Thomas had carved a simple epitaph. Her love was enough. It was everything. The ranch continued under Thomas's stewardship and then passed to his eldest son, Samuel. Rose's veterinary practice was taken over by a young woman she had trained. Grace's paintings hung in museums, preserving the history and beauty of the Montana Territory and the early days of statehood. The family that Grant and Zara had created spread and grew, their descendants carrying forward the values of hard work, honesty, and love that had defined their lives. And on quiet evenings, when the wind swept down from the mountains and the cattle lowed in the distance, some said you could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold. A rancher and his mail-order bride, who had taken a chance on each other and built something that would last far beyond their years. A love story that had begun with honesty and acceptance, that had grown through hardship and joy, and that had created a legacy that would endure for generations. The Wild West had been tamed, but the love that Grant and Zara shared remained as wild and free as it had been on that day when she confessed her secret, and he told her that her love was enough. It had been enough then. It was enough still. It would always be enough.